March 6, 2017 meeting of the Instruction Work Group of the Madison Metropolitan School District Board of Education. And the first order of business is public appearances. The way this works is that you have 3 minutes. I'll start the timer when you say you're ready. Go to the end of the table and make sure the green light is on your microphone. And I'll call the first two names and then kind of keep rotating through. So first up is Chris Carusi, and second is Heather Sorensen. And Chris.
I'm Chris Carusi. I'm a parent at Jefferson and Memorial, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak about the Personalized Pathways update on this evening's agenda. Most people in our community want to foster justice and equity in our district by making high school more relevant for all students, including those who might be slipping through the cracks. Improving outcomes for all graduates is a critical goal, and we need to work toward a better future. We can't afford to be afraid of change. That said, Personalized Pathways is a top-down model for high school reform that did not originate in our community. Pathways is rooted in workforce development. Most people in our community agree that we need to improve vocational and technical education. However, our community also believes that public schools should ultimately prepare all students for citizenship in a democratic society, not just workforce participation. I applaud the district for the decision to delay the rollout of the second pathway. However, the updated timeline for pathways is vague. What is the expansion set for 2019-2020? How many new pathways will be introduced at that time? Are we still considering wall-to-wall pathways in all of our high schools? If so, when? I'm hoping to hear more details about the evaluation plan for pathways. The demographics of the first pathway do not match the demographics of the district. It's also possible that the first pathways cohort has a higher potential for academic growth than our overall high school population. These factors need to be taken into account when gathering baseline data and designing the evaluation. I'm assuming the district is still planning a pause at some point in 2019 to make decisions about the future of pathways. This isn't on the timeline right now. Given that the board never voted on pathways, this pause is really important. By 2019, we will likely have a lot of data about the pathways implementation, but very limited data on student outcomes. The board should not make decisions about the future direction of our high schools based solely on pathways recruitment, enrollment, professional development, and other implementation outcomes. Pathways is yet another top-down reform being imposed on district staff that holds tremendous potential for initiative fatigue. This needs to be considered in the evaluation process. Finally, this evening's update includes an overview of planned pathways communication. This communication appears to emphasize marketing, recruitment, and implementation. What we need is transparency and participatory decision-making. Staff, families, students, and our community deserve a voice in determining the future direction of our high schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather Sorensen, followed by Christina Newton.
Hi, I have a student at Hamilton in 6th grade and a junior at West. Superintendent Cheatham wrote an article in Madison 365 in December, and she identified that there are some major risks to pathways, including misconceptions and inaccurate information, such as the idea that pathways is about choosing a major in 9th grade and the idea that it's not for college-bound students. I am one of those parents that's been asking questions about these two things, and I am not trying to derail pathways or spread misinformation. But in multiple settings, I've had those questions answered with a statement like, this isn't true. It is for college-bound students. It isn't about picking a major. But I still haven't felt like I've seen real evidence to reassure me so that I can stay home for meetings like this. The course of study seems to be the most concrete information that I can find about pathways that really reflects kind of where the rubber meets the road and what this is going to look like for students. And when I look at the course of study, I see a very clear way that a student can get a medical assistant certification or maybe enter a vocational training program at MATC around biotech training. What's harder for me to see is how a student who wants to apply to a school like UW-Madison can meet all their requirements in a way that isn't burdensome to them. So a student who wants to apply to UW-Madison needs to have 3 lab sciences like physics, and that's not reflected in the current pathway. Physics would have to be an elective. That student also would need to have 3 to 4 years. It's recommended to have 3 to 4 years of a foreign language. And foreign language is grouped in with the electives. It's not represented visually on the course of study. And there's a choice between art and foreign language. So I know, because I have a junior and I've been navigating these things and I went to college, all those things that are required to get into competitive colleges. But I wonder about a student who's maybe the first generation in their family to attend college and who might wake up their junior or senior year and realize that they want to go to college, but they haven't taken foreign language and that they're not meeting the basic requirements to get into college. When I looked at the Long Beach pathways, the courses of study reflect the University of California recommendations for college. Those are integrated into each course of study. So it's really an expectation, or at least visually clear, how students can make choices around that pathway, and also maybe a vocational pathway, but I think the choices are more clear. So that's the point I wanted to make.
Thank you. Thank you. Christina Newton, followed by Dana. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a number of concerns about the implementation, the evaluation, the downstream effects of pathways. My district is West, so I'll focus on West, but I think my comments and my concerns are general enough that they apply to other high schools as well. So I guess my overriding concern is that kind of the unintended consequences of trying to improve the school for some students may in fact diminish the opportunities and the experiences for many, if not most, of our other students. Specifically, I have concerns about electives that are going to be offered with a focus on science electives that you just mentioned. Even if the resources are available to keep teaching the electives, which we've been told they will be, it's a little hard to see how they will be, but even if they will be, it's not clear that students will have the time to take them given the core requirements of pathways. I have many other concerns, and in the interest of time, I won't detail them except to say, for people in this room who may not know, I've made a website that details each of my concerns. Well, it details 10 of my top concerns, to keep it short, along with responses from the board and from MMSD. So if you don't know, I've sent these concerns here and the board has responded. I received a detailed response today, so I thank you very much for that. I will read it over. I'll put those at the website. I hope that the website serves to improve communication and also serves to not spread false information. I think, I've been hearing a number of responses in various forums, either over email or in-person conversation, in-person conversations. I like to keep track of that. So I do hope it serves to improve communication, and I want to thank you guys for listening to my concerns, responding to my concerns, and also responding to other concerns. Thank you. It will be released in a few days. I can give you the URL now if that's appropriate. So it's www.personalizedpathways.website.org. Yep, I'll make that public in a few days. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana, followed by Michelle Moulton.
Hi, my name is Dana Shekel, and I don't think I'm going to be fitting in with the rest of the comments tonight. I have a junior at West High School, and I have an 8th grader at Hamilton. My daughter is enrolled in the personalized pathways for next year. It was a difficult decision to decide to do that. She made it entirely on her own. I attended 3 meetings to learn more about the program. I attended the one at West, one at Hamilton, and then I also attended one at Wright Middle School, even though I'm not a parent there. My main concern tonight is I want to express my support for the program and want to make sure that it doesn't get entirely derailed before we give it an honest try. I feel that the theme behind it is amazing. At the same time, I understand the concerns of my friends and my neighbors and my fellow speakers here. I think the biggest concern that was raised at the first meeting that I attended back, it was about November 3rd at West High School, Beth Thompson presented the information that she was supposed to. It was not her fault. I think she's amazing. The biggest concern was that it was going to be rolled out and be mandatory for all students in approximately 5 years. I have a concern with that also. I loved having it as an option. There was really very little stress on us. We could decide to do it and decide not to do it. My daughter heard many presentations at Hamilton and decided that the broad category of health equity for social justice is something that she's interested in while not limiting her at all for her future plans. I'm a graduate of University of Wisconsin-Madison. I hope my daughter will go there. I don't believe that her participating in this will negatively impact or positively impact her chances for college. I think it will positively impact her experience in high school. She wanted a smaller learning community. She thinks maybe she'd like to be a lawyer someday working on social justice, or maybe she'll do something entirely different. So I know you're getting a lot of feedback on that, so I only wanted to say that we are currently supportive of the program and understand people's concerns, want it to be optional, and want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. Michelle, followed by Eric Schoff.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for all the comments before, too. I won't say too many things since I agree with many of the things that have already been said. I have a 6th grader at Hamilton and a junior at West High. The two things I still wanted to say, one is just that I hope we eventually get lots more information about what's happening in each of the schools. I think the 4 schools in town are different. They have different student bodies. I assume that different groups of people, different students are signing up at the schools. And I hope lots more information will be forthcoming about who's in the program in the different schools, whether the achievement gaps are being closed at the various schools, who's jumping out of the program, and so forth. So far, the information's been very uniform, and I understand that right now you're trying to just say what % of which group is joining altogether, but I hope eventually we'll get more specific things. And then, because I don't think one size fits all for all the high schools in Madison. And the other thing I just wanted to emphasize, which other people have alluded to, is, high school really should be a time of experimentation. Kids need to try all kinds of different ideas in the arts, in the sciences, in literature, in history, in all kinds of things, in music, and we just don't want to close down those options and put them in a path that's going to narrow rather than widen their experimentation before college. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker is Eric.
Thank you for the chance to speak. I'm probably much less polished than some of the other speakers. I'm Eric Schoff. I'm a product of West High School. I have brothers who went to West High School and are remotely worried about what's going on with Pathways. And I'm personally concerned because I have a 6th grader at Hamilton and a junior at West. One of the main reasons that Pathways was rolled out, as best I can tell, is to close an achievement gap. There's no doubt that there is an achievement gap, and it's a heck of a problem. I haven't been able to see anything, either on the district's information or in research I've done on my own, to show that Pathways, as it's being rolled out in Madison, is going to fix the achievement gap. To the extent that it has addressed that issue elsewhere, it's been rolled out in a different way and not wall-to-wall and not district-wide all at once. One of the concerns that was raised by another parent at West High School, who apparently had a business background, put it well: if you have a product that has an 8% failure rate and a 92% success rate, which is similar to the numbers at West for graduation, you don't go and revamp your entire workflow to address the 8% at risk of jeopardizing the 92%. At one of the meetings about pathways at Hamilton, Mr. Fralin suggested that the courses, the elective courses that were going to be eliminated would be things that were obsolete. And I was not entirely politic at that meeting, and I shouted across the room, who decides what's obsolete? Just about 3 weeks ago, my junior at West came home and said they've canceled Shakespeare at West High School. Now, you can say Shakespeare is obsolete, but I think you'd find a lot of opposition to that idea across the board from people who've gone to West and from people who've not gone to West. These are not necessarily obsolete classes that are at jeopardy, and they're the things that have made West High School a great school. It may be part of the reason that West does as well as it does at getting kids into four-year colleges, is that they've got that broad curriculum. Rather than trying to unify the district under the umbrella of pathways, one might make the argument that you ought to look at the West curriculum and figure out how to make other schools more like West. All in all, I'm pleased to hear that there will be a pause. I think a pause is a good idea. I think it's great if pathways remains optional. As one option of a direction for students to take, that's a nice option, I think. But the devil is in the details, and the idea that this got this far without significant input from the community and without apparent vote from the board itself, where we were at jeopardy of revamping the curriculum at all four major Madison schools, leaving out Shabazz, is just mind-blowing to me. How do you have that kind of confidence that you're not going to jeopardize what's good about the district? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next order of business on the agenda is approval of the minutes. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes dated February 6, 2017. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Amaya? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 7-0. All right. Well, that brings us to the main agenda item tonight, which is the update on personalized pathways. And Alex and Lisa and Jen,
Thank you, TJ. Yeah, Alex and Lisa are here tonight. I'm going to kick it off. That's all right. As you all know, our district has been engaged in planning and preparation to improve both the experience and the outcomes at our high schools for the last few years, which has born the concept of personalized pathways. This idea is has several key elements. Alex will touch on these a little bit later in the presentation. A smaller learning community, linked coursework that is aligned to a theme, experiential learning opportunities, all supported by an individual student's unique academic and career plan, with the ultimate goal of ensuring that not only does every child graduate, but they graduate with a plan for what to do after graduation, and with the overarching goal that they attain the skills and abilities we've outlined in our vision for a graduate, which is more than just about academic preparation, but we want them to have the well-rounded skill sets to be full members of our community. As you know, we ramped up communication on pathways in the fall because we were working on enrolling the first cohort. And as a major result of that engagement, we got a lot of additional feedback, questions, thoughts on the pathway strategy, which is a good thing. Supportive and not supportive, as you heard tonight. The board gave us a charge at our last meeting, which was just to make sure to listen to what the community was telling us, and to listen deeply and incorporate what we were hearing into our future plans. We ultimately, all of us, Alex, me, Lisa, every member of the district team, potentially, I could apply this to the school board members. We're all temporary, right? We serve the community, right? We need to make sure that the strategy that we put in place is one that serves our community. We are servants to them. So I hope that tonight you'll see that we've taken that charge very seriously. We've incorporated what we've heard, and we hope that will provide some evidence that will continue to function in that way. We'll continue to incorporate what we hear from our community. Back when I was I did my student teaching at a high school right outside of Detroit, Michigan, and I remember reading this book called The Shopping Mall High School. Do you guys remember that book? That's kind of old school there for some of us. This concept of the shopping mall high school is I'll take a little of that, I'll go take a little of that, and kind of accumulate a whole variety of experiences. But there's lots of proof that the shopping mall high school approach actually doesn't work for kids, right? We're trying to come up with a strategy that engages them, that keeps them engaged in deep learning in the classroom throughout their high school experience. So yeah, it's interesting. So I throw that out there. Some of the speakers made me remember that book that I read way back when. I should probably go back to it. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Lisa, who wants to make a quick announcement on Pathways leadership. And then she's going to pass it off to Alex, who's going to take the lead for one of maybe his last times as the face of our Pathways effort. So Lisa, do you want to go ahead and make that announcement?
Right, you bet. So I wanted to just share that we will have a secondary program department next year. We will be having Cindy Green lead our Department of Secondary Programs and Pathways moving forward. And we thought about this a lot moving forward to give ourselves an opportunity to really focus on secondary programs, including middle school, and also encompass our work around pathways, both implementation and further development. We wanted to really give that the attention that it deserves, not isolate that, but see that really as seated within our work around secondary programming. So I believe that I've shared some of that with some of you, and we've talked with teams in central office about that and shared that with principals. So Cindy is going to take up the lead on that as our executive director, and I'm sure you will be hearing from her at this table coming up as well. She's worked really closely with the Pathways teams around implementation of their program of study and ongoing adjustments to that. So looking forward to hearing her voice and having her work with us as a team moving forward.
And Cindy and Jen Wagner, who has been the interim director of Pathways and has done a phenomenal job, are both away at Pathways Learning Experience as we speak. So they would be here if they could.
Yep, and also just to clarify, Jen Wagner retains her role as director of Pathways and also CTE. Cindy's lead in this really speaks to that need to really encompass all of secondary, like I said.
right.
I wanted to be sure that we still understood
Thank you, Lisa.
that Jen was continuing in her role, her boots on the ground implementation, her knowledge around CTE, knowing that Pathways is part of the overall secondary approach.
Yeah, so this is important because it's part of our plan to implement with excellence. We want to make sure we have the right leadership structure in place. Okay, so with that said, we're going to go ahead and pass it off to Alex. Very thankful to him. And he's going to take the lead on providing some updates and lead our discussion with the board tonight.
Great. Thank you, Jen. And just a kind of few thank yous to get started. First off, Ed, in light of your announcement last week, I just wanted to say thank you for your incredible leadership over these last few years, and the investment that you've made into the school district, and specifically your feedback in this journey to design Pathways. The feedback has been rich, and you've held us accountable to ensure that we're designing and planning with fidelity. So I just want to say thank you for your leadership. I also want to thank our thank you. I also want to thank our anchor partners who have been tireless in their support and also being on this journey of designing pathways. We are excited that Dane County has become an anchor partner. They will become more formally recognized in the revised MOA going into next year. Also excited to report that we have had very fruitful and productive and promising conversations with Edgewood College as well as the UW of Madison, and see them as future partners. And we're very excited about their role in further development of pathways. So with that, we'll get started. We have two simple goals tonight, which to provide a board an update on current status. Firstly, on our first cohort of students in the health services pathway. Get an update, provide you an update on the profession development and all the preparations needed for staff for launch in September, as well as articulating the infrastructure that we're continuing to build through the proposed budget going into the 17-18 school year. And where we hope to spend most of our time is in a discussion and getting your feedback on the revised timeline, future pathway options, our emerging evaluation plan, and community engagement. So the first segment, I'm going to kind of move quickly through some of these slides you've actually seen before, which I'll identify, so that we'll have enough time for our discussion towards the end. So even though you are familiar with the next 4 slides, they've been in every presentation for at least the last year and a half, 2 years. We think it's important that we use every opportunity to communicate what Pathways is to our community at large. So we wanted to keep these slides in, and of course our Pathways definition, as well as the guiding principles, which we initiated and were developed from starting the High School Reform Collaborative in 2014. We continue to use these as our guideposts in the design process. Of course, the vision of a graduate is something that we keep front and center, both of the design and it will play out also in the evaluation, because these are the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that we want to see in each of our students when they graduate. And of course, all the components that make up the personalized pathway system that makes this a very unique experience that's not just designed to engage students, although that's an important aspect. It is also to develop and enhance those skills that are designed to ensure that students, when we say college and career ready, like that there's actually meaning behind that. And I would encourage those present and also those who are watching now or in the future, that our Pathways website has a very substantive FAQ and has a number of videos and all of our materials from past and future, past and current. For those who have more questions about Pathways, we would encourage you to visit that website to get more information. And lastly, I forgot, I do want to thank the speakers who came before us. As Jen mentioned, we are in service to the entire community of Madison, and feedback, even when it's different, maybe different than how we see it, it's still important feedback. And so I do want to thank the speakers tonight. I generated 2 next steps just out of what I heard in the feedback from this evening. So I just wanted to say thank you to our speakers. So as you know, and what's been widely reported, we have we had 518 students and families who said yes to this approach. And I can't help but think of a student, her mom and her, we met at the expo. And she came up to me and she says, my daughter's not really interested in health services. But she's really, really interested in that approach, and she's struggling with making this decision. And I encourage them to poke holes in everything that they're hearing about. ask all of the questions. And when those questions aren't asked, ask some more. We felt that, which is why we extended the deadline by a week, because we were hearing that parents wanted to ask more questions and have discussions about pathways as they were making this important decision. And these results, which I do think are very reflective of our district demographics, these results did not happen by accident. These results are the very hard work of a collaboration between our middle schools and the high schools. They worked tirelessly for months in creating multiple opportunities for parents and students to learn and ask questions. And so I am actually very proud of the work that they did that led to these results. And more importantly, they learned from each other about the best ways to engage parents and students to be able to answer their questions authentically so that they and their families would make the best decision possible. So I do want to thank them also for their work to get to this point. Literally just a week after we closed enrollment, we spent close to 3 hours doing an after-action review with our research department along with our Pathways team to really ask all the hard questions. To what degree was this enrollment process effective? Where were the areas that were a challenge? Where were we successful? What's the evidence to support that? And we identified a couple of areas that needed to change, specifically providing parents and students an online option to enroll. We know clearly that we needed to provide more information early, both what Pathways is, as well as helping them to see the enrollment process. So we're going to start early information sessions this spring with 7th grade students and families to give them time over the summer to think about it and also provide an earlier window for students to enroll in the fall. Important takeaways from our review of our enrollment process that led to some changes for next year. So as you can see here, we have a pretty robust learning plan for not only teachers, but also for our Pathways coordinators and our school leaders to bolster their skills to launch Pathways with excellence in the fall. We'll be paying close attention not only to what our staff are learning, but how they're learning and their ability to apply that learning. This learning will set them up for implementation in the fall. And as you can see here, we'll continue to build on that learning through quarterly learning sessions that are also tethered to quarterly progress monitoring visits. So we meet with our high school instructional leadership teams quarterly. Generally, that's actually not in the school. We're actually going to change that to ensure that we are actually in school. So as we're learning about specific components about Pathways implementation, we're also going to be collecting evidence about how that learning is being applied in our schools by conducting walkthroughs, reviewing student work, looking at multiple data sets to determine where we need to adjust in our strategy and our support for schools. As a reflection of that commitment, we literally have 15 people right now, including teachers and school leaders and central office staffers who are in Nashville right now, who are doing a deep study of a number of schools there who have been nationally recognized for their work in implementing Pathways to ensure that more students are graduating and prepared for college success. So we're looking forward to hearing what they're learning when they return. So as you've already seen through the budget priorities, we're hopeful that this will pass, of course, to ensure that we're building the infrastructure to continue the implementation, both for experiential learning coordinators, ACP, and Pathways. So this graphic you've seen before, the only thing I wanted to mention here is that now that we know who the students and the families are, schools over the next month will be determining who the student and the parent representatives will be on this decision-making body for each school. Again, these teams are charged with managing their implementation process and we're making key decisions on future pathways. And so it's a very important team. And so not only the students and the families, but also in the next month, the schools will be making decisions about the teacher representatives who will be on this team. So I want to highlight here the accelerated priority for ninth graders, which we've discussed in previous budget discussions. I wanted to highlight two specific aspects of this accelerated strategy. One is the profession development that will take place this summer and fall for all ninth grade teachers to ensure that they have a deep understanding of culturally and linguistically responsive practices, that we are expecting to inform and improve our classroom cultures to ensure that every single student has access both emotionally and intellectually to the content to demonstrate skills in a very rigorous environment. In addition, which we're very excited about, is overhauling our high school parent-teacher conferences. Our high schools have been laden with this 5-minute conference between a teacher and a parent that we know does not generate the type of information that would really help the student and the parent fully understand how that student is making progress. And so we're looking to design a 25-minute parent-teacher conference that actually places the student at the center of that conference. So we envision that the student, in reflecting on his or her performance to date, and reflecting on their academic and career plan, to articulate their reflections on their performance in the presence of their teacher and their parent, for the purpose of developing kind of a mini action plan. After we've learned this and the students have the opportunity to think about where they're making progress and where they're having challenges, for the teacher to articulate his or her responsibility to help that student meet the goal that he or she has articulated. And then the parent is also kind of charged to determine what their role will be in supporting that student make achievement. So we've learned from the power of student-led conferences, and we're looking to see how well this can be implemented for all students in pathways across all 4 high schools, as well as all of the ninth graders at East High School, given their freshman academy structure. So I'm going to pause there, just if there are any clarifying questions before we move into timeline and future pathways.
Alex?
Yes,
Michael?
Mike.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to what happened with the students that were on a waiting list with East and La Follette.
So they're still there. And if students happen to decline pathways before the start, those students will be offered the seat. When we did the simple lottery, students automatically fell within a ranking, and so as soon as a student leaves, those students are afforded that opportunity. So they are still there.
And one more question. So if that happens 1 year, 2 years into pathways, where do the new students stand?
Sorry, Michael, can you ask that again, please?
So if there was an opening if an opening happened a year in, 2 years into pathways, where would that new student stand? They can merge right into the pathway?
The students who are currently on the waiting list?
Correct.
Yes, we would make that opportunity available for students who are currently on the waiting list who are still desiring to be in a future pathway.
I think what he was saying, if someone wanted to come, if someone dropped out after year 2, can someone that was on the list at the beginning join at year
Oh, yeah,
3?
yeah, yes.
So the waiting
There's
list
nothing precluding a
will
student
stay-
from.
The current one will stay 4 years on.
That is correct. Yes. Yeah, we again, we didn't have any criteria for students to be screened in. And if there are seats available and a student sees that as a viable option for them to graduate, we would not hold a student back. So remember, Pathways is not built on a sequence. I mean, it's built on a sequence of courses, but they're not prerequisites. So which would allow a student to participate.
So someone could transfer in as a junior.
Yes.
Anna?
Sure, I just had a few quick questions. Back on page 8, where you look at the demographics, do we have, or do you have a sense of students' GPA and attendance rates? Is it equally diverse? Or are we really looking at a group of students that are kind of sitting at the maybe 3.0, 2.75 GPA coming into high school?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the speakers had wanted to know a little more about the demographics per school. And I don't see why we couldn't provide that information. They generally are reflective of those percentages. There's a percentages here, high or low, are range from school. And the GPAs, they're the full gamut, from the 1.0 to the 3.8. So it's again a very, very reflective of our district.
Yeah, I would be interested in that.
Sure.
My other question was, on page 9, it says, consider a second application review process. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I had a feeling that question was going to come up. So after the after-action review was conducted, the team has not finalized, but they are considering potentially two due dates. And I think they've learned from other application or lottery processes. And they think there are some benefits to having 2 windows, so it's in consideration. Granted, I don't think the language very clear on that slide about what that means, and we can provide further details about what that looked like in the May update.
Okay, excellent. And then my last question was on page 13, or slide 13, not page, sorry. Or no, that wasn't it. It was about the Pathways team at the school-based level.
Yeah.
And it looked like there were going to be students and parents as part of the team. Will those be appointed, or will that be like an open call to people who are interested in being part of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I believe it will start with an open call, but the schools are going to be designing kind of the criteria to help, of course, narrow that down. They'll be doing that both for the parents and the students that will be on the team, as well as of the teachers.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
A couple questions. No, I'm sorry. Couple questions on slide 9, and one is the earned honors references on this page. And is earned honors going to be exclusive to Pathways, or is this a larger kind of thing that's going on? And then also, is honors and Pathways going to be exclusively earned honors? I guess there's kind of 2 sides to that.
So right now, earned honors is only a proposal for the Pathways model. And we want an opportunity to implement that and learn from that and work with our partners to provide really good professional development around high-quality curriculum. So right now, TJ, to answer your question, it is just in the Pathway, with both earned and standalone being offered.
Okay.
And our schools are really excited about expanding that significantly, but I think it is about really deeply studying it to figure out what we're learning.
And then, what are guided externships?
So guided externships is whereby we provide opportunities for teachers to learn alongside professionals in that field. So as teachers are developing content, they're also learning about what are the day-to-day experiences of someone who potentially works in that field. To provide them both context for learning, vocabulary, and experiences. It's really designed as a unique professional development experience for teachers.
Okay. And then on page 14, and this may be on the agenda for the operations work group anyway, but since you're here now and it's on this PowerPoint, I'll ask anyway. Time for teachers to implement unit recovery for all 9th grade courses. Does that mean a smaller teaching load? Does it mean substitutes? What does that translate into?
Yeah, so we've learned from a few districts to reduce course failure rates, and while also simultaneously improving grading practices. This is an opportunity for a teacher to work with a small group of students over a number of days towards the end of the quarter. For kids who need more time or need more support and or maybe specific tutoring around assessments that they didn't demonstrate mastery, or time to actually make up work with the teacher's assistants. We really want to pay close attention to what students are learning. Completing work is an important aspect of what they're learning, but that's not always a true indicator. And so providing opportunities for kids to complete those tasks, to demonstrate learning before the quarter ends is a strategy that we're looking to see if we can't reduce course failures in some of those courses.
And what will that look like for our staff, though? Will they have, will
It's compensated pay, yeah.
Will it be overloads or?
Not an overload, because that would be actually teaching of a full course. This is actually just providing opportunities for small groups of students to be with teachers. Yeah, it could happen before school, after school, or at lunchtime. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Other questions before we move to section 2? Anyone? All right, on to section 2.
Right. Okay, so as you saw in the initial pathways plan, and what you've probably seen in most presentations we've made since 14, we had decided that we would start very small with one pathway year 1, and that we would expand to a second pathway year 2. After hearing feedback on the fall, my first and second round visits to schools in the late fall, as well as understanding the need to go deep and implement deep, integrate well, and have a real strong sense about the impact Pathways is having on individual students, teachers, the school, and families. And to go deep, not just with Pathways implementation, but what the things that our high schools have been learning and implementing, specific around teacher teams, which has been a really big focus of mine this year. We want to make sure that we're creating the space and the time for our teachers and for our teams to go really deep, which is why we decided not to implement a second pathway year 2. We also believe this will actually provide more time for a deeper study through our evaluation process. And I'll be quite honest. Our schools were disappointed that they weren't actually going to be able to implement a second pathway. We had a healthy, robust discussion and debate about what that would mean. But I think we want to, and you'll see this better reflected in this slide, which we're going to ask you kind of hold in your head for the remaining of the presentation, that in September 2018, we will have a full year to fully understand the positive impact that we believe Pathways is going to have, again, based on students, teachers, our schools, and on families. But in the meanwhile, we'll be developing an expansion plan. Right now, to say that we're going to go wall to wall this year or do a second pathway this year, we don't necessarily think that's adequate. We have a belief, and it's a theory of action, that when we create the opportunities for all students, and particularly for teachers, as they design pathways together and launch together, there's a significant power in how teachers are learning together, that we think this timeline would provide that opportunity to be very confident in expanding. And so that is the process that we would return to the board for an update in December. In April, we'll provide a draft plan of that expansion plan, having just kind of 3 quarters in, and then in September 2018 with a full year implementation report that we can review to really determine what that Pathways expansion will look like. So I asked you to kind of hold. Go ahead, Jen.
Sorry, Alex, I just wanted to chime in before you move on to make sure the board knows that not only did you vet this idea of adjusting the timeline with the Pathways teams, which include teachers, but with all of our anchor partners, with the regional partners that we have, and through the High School Reform Collaborative. So we got quite a lot of additional inputs.
As well as our
on-
funders as well.
As well as our funders, just to make sure that people were comfortable
Yep.
with the adjusted timeline for the reasons
Yeah.
that Alex just described.
And they're all comfortable with that process, given our rationale and their desire for us to actually execute extremely well. So you'll excuse the busyness of this slide. I was trying to illustrate kind of who's involved in this evaluation planning process. So to the left, you'll see all of our anchor partner team members there. We've been discussing both the need and elements of an evaluation plan, and they are full in. And there's agreement that the Wisconsin Center for Educational Research would be a great resource, which is why we began to engage them last fall. The group to the right, these are the coordinating institutions of the Great Lakes and Consortium. So this is the organization of organizations that are supporting the 4 regions implement pathways, and we're all at very different stages of implementation. They also are engaging WCER in developing evaluation. We were hoping that the timeline would be in sync, that we'd be able to kind of ride the coattails of that process, given some of these organizations have already been involved in collecting data on pathways in their regions, but they're moving slower than we can work. And so we've decided to move forward by beginning to have conversations with WCER. And we've had some initial meetings to calibrate on metrics and to determine what are the right elements that should be included in an evaluation plan. So you see here kind of a timeline for both development, when the plan would be going to the board, and just to clarify, the board would be voting through consent for the evaluation expenditure, which we hope, if the board moves forward, that we would begin the evaluation process in July and have a year 1 implementation report in September 2018 and a 3-year evaluation report in September 2020. So this is what we're using as a framework to engage WCER in that process. I wanted to provide the board just an overview of metrics that we'd be looking at to help us better understand the impact of pathways, both quantitative measures as well as qualitative. It is important for us to understand how pathways is narrowing gaps and having a positive impact on student performance indicators. It is also important for us to understand how students and families experiencing pathways, how they are having a stronger sense of self through their academic and career plan. We have been paying close attention to the November 2016 study that SRI International published that did a 7-year study on pathways in California. And the results are good, and they confirm previous results, but this was the only study that actually had post-secondary outcomes. And we've used some of their qualitative indicators about the experiences that students were having in their outlook on the high school experience, but more so their post-secondary plans and their ability to execute on those plans. So we're more clear about what we want to see in an evaluation plan. We also are going to incorporate what our anchor partners are also seeing as important metrics, being that they have not only invested time, but an investment into our pathway system. And so we're also going to be including their feedback in metrics that we're going to design for our evaluation plan. Yes?
And just in case people aren't as familiar as the strategic framework goals as we are, those 7 goals, I don't think I probably could tick them all off right now. Should I try? No, I promise I'm not going to do that. But those include things like grad rate, 9th grade on track, GPA in junior year, et cetera. So some of the more traditional metrics, as a reminder, maybe more for the public.
Yeah. And of course, those who are not familiar, you can find those in our annual report that will articulate those. Okay, so now on to future pathways. So again, you've seen this criteria before. This is the criteria that we used to design the first health services pathway. This is the criteria that we'll use to create future pathways. Student interest being the most important criteria in developing a pathways. But we received tremendous feedback in the fall about the pathways future options. So using some of that criteria, we identified 5 pathways, which were at that time visual and performing arts, engineering, information technology, business and entrepreneurship, and of course health services. Given the feedback that we gathered in the fall, with the goal of wanting more students to see themselves in pathway options, we added communication to the arts. We added architecture and construction to engineering. And then we added a whole new pathway, government and public service. We think these options right now, these pathways provide more options for students. Our high schools are quite excited about creating more flexibility for students to see themselves in these pathway options. But we also plan to listen more intently even this spring as we get feedback from our teachers on March 13th in the community starting on March 14th about what other pathways are missing. We are not making the assumption that these 6 are it. And we're looking forward to hearing from stakeholders all across the city. We're most excited about our discussion with teachers on March 13th, where we'll be also talking to them about this idea of a school-based proposal. We do believe that we want some consistency in pathways across the schools. So we do believe that there will be several of these that will remain consistent across all 4 high schools. Which we think would leave room for school-based teams to design a pathway themselves. And we plan to return to the board in May with that process outlined. And we'll incorporate all of course, the feedback that we'll receive, particularly from the teachers and the school-based teams on March 13th. So here is our community engagement plan. It does have 2 goals. Well, actually has a few goals, but the 2 most important ones are our goal to continually to build the knowledge and understanding of our community at large about pathways. The what, the why, to make sure that our families have good, accurate information about what pathways is, and provide the opportunity to ask good questions and continue to provide us feedback. And that feedback that we'd be looking for specifically around that time are the future pathways options, the ones that we've used given the criteria and ones that they believe are missing. So you'll see here that the elementary school families, which is a group that we somewhat missed last year, we're making a concerted effort to provide them information and opportunity to provide us feedback, given that their children in the future will have this opportunity. So we're excited about that. We're also excited that this spring we're going to ask teachers to, through an interest survey, get a sense of which pathway they think they are most excited about or see themselves teaching in. We think that's going to provide us also some good feedback about how our teachers are not only seeing pathways, but how they're seeing themselves in the pathway design process. And we'll have a survey. Jen, you want to chime in?
Just going to say that, can you go, on that slide, what we're hoping to find through this engagement process, right, it's much more than just a communication plan, is kind of what that sweet spot is between the interests and desire of staff, the interest, desire of students and their families, and our community at large. I mean, I always talk with our team about this idea of a triple Venn diagram, and we're looking for that place that's shaded in the center. And if we can find that place, those themes, those
Yeah.
thematic areas, then we know those are places where we can work with some
Yeah.
determination. So just
Yeah.
want to maybe
And it is that sweet
emphasize
spot that we plan to report out in
In
our
May.
May board meeting.
That's right.
Where we'll have a synthesis and a summary of all this data that we'll be able to provide for the board in our May update. So yeah, I talked about the survey. It'll go out to staff. That's going to be embedded within a conversation with all staff members at high schools on the 13th, and then we're going to open it up to the community on the 14th. It'll be open for a number of weeks, and then that data will be synthesized. And we discussed this earlier, but because we will be starting the information sharing process, information about pathways for 7th grade families this spring, to again provide them lots of opportunities to learn and ask questions. We'll be starting that process this spring, and in the fall we'll be leveraging all of the engagement processes that we know were positive and impactful. We'll start those earlier this fall than we did this year. And so with that, we'll leave it for a discussion about what's resonating with you about the revised timeline, future pathways, the evaluation plan, and or other questions you may have.
Dean?
Thanks. Thanks, Alex. Couple things. One, an experiential project-based learning option is what this is. It's not job shadowing that I did when I was taught 20 years ago. So that's been around for a while. So this is something new, and I think that's not clear enough in people's what they're getting. So a couple things. Could you actually give us at some point, I think I asked this last time, what a schedule would look like? What is a student in the project going to do? What would their experience be? And so we need to see that, so that people need to know, what does this really mean?
Yeah.
It's not just more field trips and job shadowing.
Yeah.
It's something different. It's experiential learning, experiential project-based learning experience. That's a thing that's different than just job shadowing and field trips. And also, could you talk a little bit about the opportunity for students to take electives, and that the question was asked by our friend here about some electives not being offered anymore because of this. So can you talk a little bit about the opportunity for students to take the electives, and are some not going to be offered because, and if they are not going to be offered, why are they not being offered? I know some of it's because there's not enough enrollment in it. So there's only 4 kids sign up for it. Well, that's understandable, and that's not anything new. So we need to hear that, and people need to hear that as to how those decisions get made as well. So that was the one question, and then the other one I'll just throw in. You can get to that. Then I'll be done. You talked about Edgewater and UW.
Edgewood, yeah.
Edgewood.
I'd love to go to Edgewater, but I'll go to the Edgewood. Right.
He'll sign up.
Yeah, I got my teaching license. It's a really good school. Really easy to work with. You said that they're becoming more interested in working on this. In what way? I'd like to hear that, so have at it.
Okay. I counted 4 questions, and I'm going to try to get to all of them.
Then I'm done.
So I'll start with the conversation we've had with UW and Edgewood. And so it was a hour and a half long meeting with Edgewood. It was really just a preliminary. Like, here's what Pathways is. Here's why. Here's what it looks like. What feedback do you have? What are you learning about this high school strategy? And we left the meeting very excited. They committed to we actually agreed to meet 2 months later, which is actually coming up in a couple of weeks. And we don't actually have a plan with Edgewood. The goal there is just for them to fully understand Pathways. They appreciate everything about it, and they actually want to figure out what is their inroads. How can they play a role in the Pathway system? So I think we'll learn more the more we engage them. But they're fully invested in this learning process and exploration phase. And with UW, we had a great full PAC 60 meeting with Rebecca Blank, the chancellor of the UW-Madison, as well as some members of her team. We got a very strong sense that they are committed to being a part of this process. And that could look a number of ways, and we're going to explore that by having someone participate on our anchor partner team over this semester, learn more to figure out what are the right inroads for UW to play a significant role, so that when we revise the MOA for the anchor partner team, we'll know specifically what that role will be, specifically for Dane County, which is new, and for Edgewood and UW. So as it relates to the electives, so first, all of our schools every year annually for the last two to 3 years go kind of through a very robust review of all their courses to determine what courses need to be modified, what courses need to be eliminated, generally based on course requests. And or dropouts. So kids who sign up for a course, take it for a couple of weeks, are like, oh, this is not the course for me, and then they drop the course. So schools now have a very strong routine about how they make those decisions, which those schools make. The one course that was referenced, if Pathways wasn't even a discussion, and all things stayed the same, the school would have made the decision to close that class. And they did that to one other class as well. Now, it is clear if Pathways continues over the next 4 years and continues to grow, will all electives stay in every school? No. We're confident that won't be the case. But schools will be making the decision on through what kids are telling them about the courses that they're experiencing, that they're signing up for, or that they're not, or the ones that they're dropping. Schools make that decision. And generally, sometimes they're in consultation with us, but we believe schools are best poised to make those decisions. We know for the program of study, we've actually made a change. We know that there was concerns about that Pathways core being somewhat restricting, and there was a sequence of courses aligned to our Project Lead the Way course sequence, and we've actually made that not a requirement, and we've pulled that out. Students will still have the option, of course, if they see that course, that sequence of course as options, they'll still have that available to them, but we've not made that a requirement. And we're working with schools to identify courses that they have or want to create new that are more reflective of their pathways theme. And there was great consensus across all of our schools when we made that decision last month. As it relates to the great idea that I got, I can't remember the speaker who said it, but understanding how each school is implementing Pathways, I think there's something in our May update that I think do want to make more clear and tangible. In a visit that we had with our Great Lakes Consortium, we spent a day and a half deeply analyzing several schools in the Columbus, Ohio region. And we saw exceptional instruction, exceptional teaching and learning, shifts in practice, and I think what the key takeaway there, when I actually sat down with two principals, who I think were really exceptional principals, I will say. The first principal, she says every year we made a change. We adapted our pathway system, given the feedback that we were hearing from parents and from community stakeholders. She says every year they made slight adjustments, which is really good to know that for pathway system that we saw as really high performing, that they went through this process of community engagement, gathering feedback, and making this necessary adjustments. But she also said, because she grappled with the same things that we're grappling with, that there's the perception that it's a vocational program, that it's kind of tracking kids into jobs, or tracking kids to 2-year degrees. She says they grappled with all of those exact same challenges. And she says it didn't really become, it became less of an issue once Pathways was actually implemented and people could actually see what it was doing, the experiences that kids were having. I will say that something, a key takeaway for me from Columbus was everything about what they communicated was about kids prepared for college. Everything. And I think we somewhat missed the mark in that communication, particularly in the communication tools that we're using. Someone also made note of that. They also have a statewide system that allows kids to take many dual credit opportunities, which means kids are at high school but taking college courses, and that was fully embedded within their program of study, which is something I really want us to deeply think about to provide those opportunities. So I think in our May board update, I think we will actually bring specific examples. I think the schedules that you mentioned, and maybe potentially hearing from schools about what their specific pathway will look like, so the community can hear specifically what students will be experiencing. We'll have that fully fleshed out so we can help to eliminate some of those misconceptions.
And the only other thing that I wanted to add, and Cindy can talk about this more in depth, is those elective courses that we've seen schools discuss in that Pathways core area there. Does not mean that those elective courses will look the same as they've always looked in a high school. It's a really great time for those teams to, if needed, refresh those courses, think about how they would fit within an integrated approach to either projects or experiences. So schools are really owning how the teams will work together and how those pieces, whether it's the core courses required for graduation or the electives that might be there, how do they fit together so that it's not just sort of filling in, but that it's really meeting the needs of students who select that pathway.
Yeah, if I can also say, part of the discussion when we get to the place where we have a stronger sense of what future pathways are, schools will be able to look at all of their elective courses to really figure out which ones really fit well, and or to modify some of those courses so that there is clear alignment. So I'll give you an example. When we pulled out the Project Lead the Way courses as a pathway core, East said, hey, we have a law and ethics class that we think fits really well with our pathway theme. And so a school has identified a current elective course that currently exists, and they're now aligning with the health services pathway. So the goal is not to eliminate electives. That is not the goal of Pathways. The goal is to ensure that schools can leverage their assets, which include elective courses, so they're better reflected in providing students the type of experiences that we believe Pathways will provide them.
Okay, just one last little point. So in May, you're going to bring us a schedule. What I would like to see is a schedule of a student, what they do.
Yes.
When they show up in the morning, what class they go to, and then whatever project-based experience they're going to be at, what they do when they get there. I don't care how they get there. That's a detail I don't need. Just what do they do? What does someone do in a project-based experience?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Janet, I'm not sure if Ed's in the queue, but I know James is. Mary.
I just wanted to tack one last thing on. One of our speakers mentioned the course of study document, and she compared it to another document she had seen, I think, in Long Beach. I've heard that feedback multiple times, and we will definitely be following up on that too. I think the course of study needs to better reflect the kinds of choices that students have to make. Multiple years, if not 4 years, of a world language, etc. So we'll be following up on that as well.
James, Mary, and maybe Michael. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And then Ed.
Thanks, TJ. Actually, some very good questions and concerns by speakers tonight, and so I've been thinking about a few of those. And I guess two questions. One question is, I know that you all will be answering those or have answered some of them. I'd be interested in seeing some of those answers. So will those questions and answers be part of the minutes? Where would those be? Because I'd be interested in seeing how we respond to some of those concerns that's being raised.
Yeah, James, the one speaker who mentioned the website.
Okay.
Oh. Hi. Those were emailed out to, you were on that email as well.
Yes, I recall that.
Anything that comes out of tonight's meeting, we always follow up with the board with all answers to any question that was raised.
Okay,
And
yeah.
we're continually updating the FAQ document, James, that is on our website as future questions come up. So we'll make sure to remind you guys of that document as well.
All right, thank you, because I am interested in some of the answers. And there's one question tonight that I would like answered tonight, and I think it was raised by, and I don't know your name, but the question was around when you get in the pathway, and if I don't get this right, we will allow you to step in and make sure I get it right. But when you get in the pathway, that the total body of courses you take may not allow you to, you may not satisfy the prerequisites for college, for example, UW-Madison, or it could be some other college. We have students here that in the district, they go elsewhere. Can you comment on that, whether or not there's some crowding out that's occurring by taking the pathway? Because that's what the question was.
Yeah,
And I guess it piggybacks on maybe some of the elective conversation.
Yeah. So we know that for some students, say they're an AVID, right, who have an elective that's kind of built into their program, kids will have to make some tough choices but related to their goals. Do we want all students to be prepared and see themselves going to college? Yes. How kids make choices about getting there, that is left up to them and their families, hopefully leveraging the academic and career planning process. Pathways does not eliminate the opportunity to take a foreign language course. It just simply does not. For a student in AVID, it still doesn't, but they'll have a tougher goal about maybe choosing other elective courses that they may want to have. Part of our, and you start reflecting the professional development for our scheduling principles, is to better think about our scheduling practices. So I know I've said this before, but our scheduling practices have not changed in probably 100 years. And so our scheduling practices are designed to keep the school functioning exactly the way it is. So we've not really thought about how we can think about a more student-centered approach to scheduling. We started that process a year and a half ago, and schools really appreciated the opportunity to engage professionals about a myriad of ways in which you can schedule a school. And schools are asking themselves tough questions, even more so than we were asking about how are we organized? How do we make decisions about the courses that we have, new courses that we want to create? And so to go back to your original question, Pathways is not going to eliminate the ability for a student to go to a four-year college, a competitive four-year college. It just won't. And there's nothing in the program of study that would indicate that a student would lose that opportunity. We're trying to create more voice and choice for students and families. Part of that is just in this year one option, right? That we said we're not going to do Pathways for all kids. We want to be able to introduce choice, and we want to introduce choice in future pathways. So I think it goes back to how we actually communicate both in our materials, where those options lie, where those opportunities students and families have, whether it be foreign language, whether it be music, whether it be advanced coursework, which is what we expect that more kids are going to take and have access to more advanced coursework, particularly given the work that we're going to do next year with Equal Opportunity Schools. So yeah.
I think bottom line, this is why we have to update that program of
Yes.
study to demonstrate the child who is going to take 4 years of a rural language and all the things that you do to be the most competitive when it comes to college acceptance. And we'll take that on, and you'll have it by the May meeting.
All right, okay, thank you for that last question. The evaluation in July, maybe I'm not clear on the timeline, but what will evaluation in July entail?
So it's just the launch, the beginning of the process.
So
Part of the evaluation is that we want to study everything about Pathways, how we're implementing, how we're designing, the professional development, students' experiences, family experiences, our enrollment process, courses kids are taking, how kids are performing in
Pretty
courses.
much the initial aspects of pathway.
Well, both the implementation and the actual execution on that pathway over 3 years. So does that answer your question? Okay.
Okay, Mary?
Alex, I'd just like to start by thanking you and your team for all the time you put into this. I know it's an enormous process of involving a lot of people, a huge community, and it certainly takes perseverance to do it, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'm glad that as a district, we are imagining or reimagining, opening ourselves up to how best we educate students. Because times are changing. And to think that we have been doing things largely the same way for 100 years. I come more from a business background, and there's not a business in business that stays alive by doing things the same way for 100 years. We don't know, though, how this is going to work. And you can bring up examples of whether it's Long Beach or Nashville, and it's great that there's good examples out there, people to learn from, school districts to learn from. But we know that in education, there are no quick answers or cookie cutter approaches that you can take from one area and replicate, and it will have the same outcomes.
Agreed.
Here. So most of my questions are really around, I would say, reducing the risk. We don't know. I'm glad we're exploring, and I'm glad that we're doing more than exploring, but we're actually undertaking this. So one question I have is, with the surveys that we have done with students, with parents, or with the community, and refresh my memory, what do those look like?
The surveys that will be going out?
Have we done any surveys?
No.
We haven't done any
No.
surveys. Okay. I think it would be useful as a board member to know, and I don't know what the group would be, the best group, and what it looks like. But I'd be interested in what the timing of that is what people are feeling about their current high school experience, what they want to see, and whether in fact they want to have. And I love the options that you put up there. But I think we're going off of, we can't go by the anecdotal feedback of the people who show up at these meetings. But yet there's nothing else to go off of, is there?
There's obviously the senior survey, there's the climate survey for high school. So
Yeah.
it's not as if we're going off of no survey information, but it's not a specific survey
Survey to
on
this.
pathways.
So something we
Yeah,
we
but
might
I
wanna
think that's a
consider.
great question.
And in that survey, if we decide to do a survey, is to also make sure that we're not leading students, and whether one of the answers might be, no, I really love my experience, and I feel fully prepared for college, as one of the possibilities. I think my next question is around the assessment. And one thing that concerns me in the slides is that we talk about averages. And I know this is a slide that is consolidating and summarizing. But for us to be the most successful, we cannot be looking at our district as averages. I'd like to know, for the students that fall into different groups, how's that experience for them? And those may be the students who are at the top of their class. It could be the students who struggle the most. It could be, I don't know all the different ones. Because I think what we want to design, if we are really undertaking this, is a design that is going to make the high school experience better for every student, not the average of what everyone looks like together, and we've moved an average. So the assessment, I'm really interested in how that will look and the planning, because as a board member, that's going to inform our votes and our direction. So I think having some eyes on that prior to that time or as it develops would be really helpful.
You definitely will, and we had already planned on making it available to you, so you got
I know
it.
TJ and I love just.
I know you do. I always know who's going to ask for it.
I will repeat something that I know I said in the last presentation, but this is in light of this concept of the risk of the unknown. It's just inherent in anything that you do, is that having an option that is basically a liberal arts option, it not only reduces the risk, but it gives those who have real concerns of that unknown and of this change the ability to continue in a way and with us in a school that they're happy with. And I think it is important. And I would imagine we can accommodate that. And will it look exactly the same with all the same electives? No, I don't think necessarily we can do that. But what could it look like? And I really think that I don't want to do this as a board member, shoving this down people's throats who are really, really, really happy with their schools.
Michael?
Can I just respond just to,
Oh, sure.
just to
Go
two
ahead.
elements? So
Sorry.
thank you, Mary. And I am looking forward to being back in schools working directly with principals. So Cindy and Lisa can make this thing fully operational. I just want to make sure I understood the first question. And so is it about Pathways as a whole, or the options that we'd like to provide in Pathways as far as the feedback in the surveys? I just want to make sure I understood that right. Because if it's about Pathways as a whole, right, we did not have a comprehensive survey about do we think schools should even change, right? We heard a lot anecdotally, right, through the entry plan, but we also remember we had a 7-month coursework review that was conducted that told us clearly from students, parents, teachers, and even some central office staff about the systems that were really broken and the experiences that kids were not having but wanted, right? More experiences outside of the classroom, less rote kind of in rows, hearing from teachers, the ability to apply their learning. So we heard that theme consistently at all 4 corners of the city. That did shape this strategy for Pathway. So I would agree that a comprehensive survey wasn't a vehicle, but those groups that we engaged through that coursework review provide us consistent themes, going back to what Jen heard in her entry plan in 2013, that all that data did point us in the direction of creating a strategy that would both personalize the experience through small learning communities, ensure that all kids found great relevance in their courses, and that they had some connection, some interconnection between those courses. Was a theme that helped us to shape Pathways. I just want to make sure I was hearing that question right and painting that picture for how we got there.
Well, thank you for expanding on that. And maybe this isn't, maybe it is building on what is already out there. Maybe it isn't something that's undertaken at this point that's part of the assessment. But but as part of that, I think it is important not just to focus on the students in the pathways. Use that time, and since we're going to be doing that type of analysis or some project, is to incorporate that, to actually dig maybe a little deeper into what you may have heard earlier on, maybe things that are in the climate survey, then putting them basically almost up against some of the things that that Pathways provides, and see if
what's
that
on
is. Yeah, so I would like to see this, that the evaluation, not only looking actually at Pathways, but as long as we're doing it, is to provide us with more information about more the lay of the land and what students, particularly students, are experiencing and feeling, and again, not the averages.
Got it. Thank you.
Michael?
Yeah, so two concerns, two immediate concerns. Alex, when you keep talking about pathways, you keep citing East and Avid, so that's a little bit of a concern. I would like to hear more examples being inclusive of East, West, La Follette, Memorial, when you discuss pathways. Because, for example, which brings me to my second concern, at La Follette we have the variance in schedule. So I'm curious how it would work, how it is going to continue working. And then as you bring in other items such as students that are involved in DLI, I do not want, and I'm concerned, there's still questions with DLI, I'm concerned with things that might, with issues that might arise between DLI and Pathways. I do not want to hinder the other, but rather augment and help each other. So I would like to see more clarity. I like Dean's idea of giving examples of how a student would maneuver throughout their schedule and maintain, for example, the DLI, or like you said, examples with Abbott at East and other West and Memorial concerns.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. We actually have mock-ups, mock schedules for various groups of kids who are in Avid, kids who are in DLI, but they've been mock-ups. We've been using them as guideposts in the design process, but I think in May we'll actually just have kind of real live schedules so you'll be able to see how those things play out. I will be honest, at La Follette, there are schools who are looking at La Follette's schedule because it does lend itself to an easier implementation of pathways. So no worries at La Follette at all. And again, they are customizing their decision-making process given their unique schedule. And they're doing that with teachers at the table and student services members to make sure that they are meeting the needs of their kids. Each of our schools has actually spent a considerable amount of time with our multilingual office as well as our student services office to review every single student to make sure that the necessary accommodations are made for all of those students in preparation for them.
So, like Alex said, we can bring you actually samples or mock-up schedules for students who both have a foot in the DLI side of the house as well as in a pathway side of the house. There are particular courses in the high school that are specified to be taught in Spanish. So we'll show you exactly how those fit either within or outside of a pathway, and then how that impacts other choices for students. And we'll be happy to bring that to you. But I know Sylvia and Teresa in our Office of Multilingual and Global Education have been working really closely with schools to make sure those opportunities are there for students, regardless of if they're in a bilingual or a monolingual program.
Excellent. I look forward to seeing those.
Maya and then Ed.
I just wanted to thank you for your communication plan for the community and students and families. I think it's important that we know about when they'll be included. Sorry. But I was hoping that I would be able to see something like what was offered to the board for the board's calendar about how there will be meetings in the future. I know it's just as hard for families to plan around their schedules, so if they could keep that in mind, I think that would be great. It doesn't necessarily need to be an in-person meeting. At some of the Student Senate meetings, since we're also talking about pathways, we talked about whether it could be like a town hall meeting or an electronic platform. So a schedule that was offered on the district website just for future meetings with like a rough alignment of when, of which months the meetings would be offered in, would be something that students and their parents who attend Student Senate would be interested in seeing. And then my second concern, or rather comment, I guess, was regarding the addition of government and public service. We were very excited to see that at our last presentation at Student Senate. We saw a PowerPoint without that slide, and it was really cool to see it offered here. That'll be something that I'll be happy to report back to the students, but just something else that was talked about in the meetings that I want to bring up here is the inclusion of liberal arts concepts in the pathways. I know it's hard with the limited schedule, but it is a concept that it is something that wants to be included in the curriculum, which is why a liberal arts pathway won't be offered, but just making sure that actually happens and that's fulfilled. So that's the reasoning about why a liberal arts pathway won't be a decision our district wants to make.
Thanks, Amanda.
Ed?
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, thanks for all your efforts on this. I think this has clarified a lot, and I'm just repeating what has been said before, but it would be great to have more information about the potential course of studies available to people so they can just follow through that. I would just like to kind of go through this and make sure I understand and clarify for anyone listening what the path forward seems to be. So for next year, that's already set. It's the health sciences, and so our current 8th graders have either chosen that or haven't, and then go forward. For the 18-19 school year, it will be the same. So for our current 7th graders, they'll have the same option that the 8th graders have. They can either choose to enroll in the health services pathway or not.
Correct.
So that won't be any different. What will be different, at least as it's contemplated now, is for the 1920 school year. So this will affect our current 6th graders. And what is at least contemplated now is basically a full menu of pathways from which the students can select. So they will, if we go that path, then the students would have to select a pathway, for when they start 9th grade. And as I understand it, you're thinking there will probably be 5 different pathways offered at each high school?
We think it will be about 4.
4, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to hear about the possibility that teachers at schools can design their own pathway. If that path is pursued, do you expect that would be ready for the 1920 school year?
So it's a good question. I think that depends on what we learn and what we decide next September. We want to prepare both the process. We think the process will be rigorous. Right? It will not be like someone has an idea and they kind of put together a one-page proposal. It would be a rigorous process for the teams, and it would actually include them engaging multiple stakeholders outside of their school, including community partners, to make sure that kids had all of the experiences that we would expect a student in Pathways to have. So because that process is in design now, which we'll be able to review in May, we'll have clarity about that in May. But we think, and what we've learned from schools where they've allowed for school-based proposals, there's tremendous excitement. And I haven't necessarily seen the results yet on what we call, school-based or team-based proposals. But we think we owe it to this designer process to see if a school, given its strengths and its assets, for them to have that opportunity. So I think when we decide next year, when we have a good set of data in front of us and feeling confident in the district and the school's ability to implement well, whether that ability to implement on that proposal would be the same year we would implement all, or potentially a second pathway. I think we'll know that next year.
Okay. And if that option is pursued, that the school itself develops a pathway, then the pathways would differ among the schools.
That's correct.
So you would contemplate what? 3 the same and 1 different for high school, or would you be comfortable with 2 the same and 2 different at each high school, or is that too much variation? Do you have a sense of that?
Well, so our school's size alone, with 1,450 students at East and 2,152 at West, the numbers alone do kind of require us to think about flexibility and options. I can give you my personal opinion, but I think we will focus on what we learn in the process of implementing in our 1-year study to make that determination. I think we have been planning, though, historically for the last couple of years, that it would be roughly about 4 pathways, which I think in a school like West they could probably get up to 6. When we built out the numbers in 2014. Given their size and what we thought, given their desires to have multiple options, we thought that 6 would definitely be viable. It's just it's a lot to manage. We know there are a number of schools and districts. Columbus is one. They actually scaled back because they had too many, and to manage the quality became a challenge. And our schools did commit early to making sure that they had a number of pathways that were the same across schools, to learn from each other, and to ensure that we weren't creating inequities across schools.
I think bottom line, Ed, we need the chance to implement the first pathway and learn from it. This is the point of adjusting the timeline. And I think one of the speakers used the term top-down, and that is not what we want this to be. This is why we actually have a pathways team at each high school, and so they'll be determining, in large part, what works for them as well. So I think we've got to let the process. We've got to kind of trust the process here, which I know is hard to do.
No, I trust the process. Not for you. The last point I wanted to raise is I certainly agree with Mary, and I've said this before, that for this to work, every student has to see something that works for them.
Yeah.
And so there's been talk about a liberal arts pathway. I'm happy to see government and public service added as a possible pathway. I think that addresses that need. And I've been thinking here, well, what would liberal arts entail that wouldn't be encompassed in a government and public service pathway? And I'm not really sure. I mean, people will correct me and clarify on that, kind of English literature, I guess, but you're taking English classes anyway.
We are hoping that the government and public service pathway will fulfill that need. We will learn that when we get feedback going through this process. I'll be honest, I don't know what a liberal arts pathway looks like because we've not seen it. But we're going to get feedback, and we're going to learn about how people are understanding that or see it or want to see it, or if they can see it in these options that we provided. But I'm sure we're going to hear lots of good feedback in these next couple of months.
Okay, thanks. Talia?
My turn. A couple of things. First off, I want to thank you for showing the flexibility in both the engagement communications part and the design and picking of the next pathways. And I think that we can see a lot of growth and improvement in both those areas, and it's much appreciated. One quick question, then, kind of more complex thing, which is, how big, in terms of number of students per grade, what's the smallest viable pathway you could envision?
Yeah, it's a good question. When we mapped this out a couple years ago, I think we landed around 75, which is really just about 3 classes. And what we had seen in other schools and districts, that when you get so small, it becomes just a couple of classes. It doesn't necessarily give you the bang bang for your buck. And so, 75 to 90, what we thought was an adequate number, which we think potentially could be a result of some teachers or teams creating pathways that kind of have a niche on a specific area. But 75 to 80 was the number we had been initially playing with as far as the smallest number.
That helps kind of think and visualize things. I guess I want to look at the dates on slide 17. You said keep that in your mind. And especially around the April and September of 2018, and tie these to the evaluation stuff on slide 20. And I kind of, in your response to, first off, in the evaluation pieces in that, I want to echo Mary that we need to be looking at multiple measures with multiple different groups of students, and we need to be looking at ranges and distributions of students and things like that. I mean, we need to have as sophisticated as we can to look at both the experiences and also the results in terms of what is quantifiable. I'm not really, in your answers to Ed, I kind of heard two different things about those September 18th and September 2018 dates. At one point, Ed said it sounded like that September 18th is a vote whether we go wall to wall, and then you kind of backed off from that a little bit, said the proposal might be for two pathways on September 18th. And I guess that in some ways, going back to one of Mary's points, is that what decision we're making and when we're making it has to be back mapped into what evaluation information we have at that time. And certainly, if in September 18th we're being asked to consider wall to wall, I don't think we'd have, I can't possibly see how we'd have adequate information. We'd have 1 year of one cohort and one sign up of another cohort. I just can't possibly see an evaluation being of any real use at that point. Whereas I would say right now that if we were being asked to add a second pathway, I think that we'd easily find comfort levels there. And maybe even a third. I think that most of us were comfortable with going forth with the second pathway without any evaluation in hand. So I guess I'd like to hear your thinking about what might be before us in terms of proposals in that April and September of 2018, and B, what might be before of us in terms of a basis for decision making in April and September of 2018.
That's a great question. So I think in April, we're going to outline a draft pathways expansion plan. So it'll be board to date what we know. This is our best thinking about what the future of pathways will look like. And when that will happen and what pathways we think should be included. Being a part of this design process since day one, we have always communicated the goal and the desire and the purpose for going wall to wall. We've never kind of shied away from that. And we've become more and more clear about the tension and the challenges that come with managing two whole systems within one school. And so when we get to, what we've learned is when you get to the 50% mark of an entering class that's in a pathway and 50% is not, the strain and the challenges of managing two schedules, two systems is not something I don't believe our schools would benefit from. I think kids would potentially start getting adversely impacted. And so I do think the decision point would be how confident are we, given what we've seen in year one results qualitative and quantitative, to go wall to wall. And if there's not confidence there, then it'll be about expanding to a second or third pathway. I think, I'm going to say second pathway. That would be my recommendation, because I think introducing 3 pathways, in 19, we're just we're asking for problems. So I think it would be either an expansion of a pathway or wall to wall. And that's I think it's gonna be based on the confidence that we've built, not only in the board, but also the confidence in our schools and in our community about seeing the benefits for all kids. And we're gonna prepare as much as we can, both for quality implementation this year and next, while also thinking about what further expansion would be to actually prepare our teachers for that professional development, which we know they'll need even if we don't expand wall-to-wall that year.
I appreciate that. And one of the things that, I've said to people in talking about pathways is that there's a lot of things where we don't know till we know.
Yeah.
And I think you've been candid about where you think things are going to be, and also candid about the fact that you're not sure yet. And I think that I think our community is beginning to understand some of that, which is good. I do want to repeat that even a phased-in wall-to-wall at September 2018, I have difficulty seeing sufficient evidence to make those changes. And I'm not saying that it wouldn't exist, but I have difficult imagining that what I understand in terms of what evidence will be available. And we will have qualitative data around implementation. We will have probably some survey data. We'll have 1 year of 9th grade on track data and not a lot else. If you look at, Jen referenced our strategic framework goals, 9th, 10th grade on track, and junior grade point average. Won't have any of that. Won't have any grad rate. Won't have any. We'll have We'll have sign up data for the second year, attrition data or lack of attrition data for the first pathway. We'll have some things, but I think that and when we talked last week before this meeting, I think that kind of just this is what I'm going to wrap it up, is that one of the things Mary kind of joked about us both wanting this. But I think that if the RFP could be shared with the board before it's issued and, in an informal manner, that would be very useful to know what the evaluation and the timelines on the evaluation pieces will be. So I want to repeat that in public, which I said in private, and echo kind of what I think Mary was saying also. Dean's turn, unless Alex or Lisa want to respond.
Real brief, so our partners here, what's in it for them as far as goals, and what are they going to be looking for? Can you just comment, and how are they going to measure those goals? How can you just comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're actually gathering those as we speak. They have affirmed our goals. They want to see kids having better experiences, graduating more, but they really want to see students demonstrate those skills that we've been learning from higher ed institutions as well as employers about the lack of skill or understanding from students who have graduated, not just from Madison, but from all across. So I don't have the specific response as far as their metrics. We're going to be including that in the response, which you'll see later. But I know it's really going to be about how do we make, I wish I could go to the graduate profile, live within those specific skills that they really want to see, both in students who are entering 2-year, 4-year, as well as those students who desire to enter the workforce. Although we really are encouraging students that post-secondary learning is necessary in 2017, and so those will be included in the evaluation report that you'll see.
Anna?
Well, most of my questions were asked, so just little ones here. When you were talking about the activity going on in Columbus, Ohio, the people you've been trying, is that part of the Pathway Project? Is that what they're? I tried to
part of Great
Google it.
Lakes?
Is it the Columbus Foundation and the Pathway Project?
So Columbus, there are a number of districts right on the edge of Columbus. They are part of that region. So that region is one of 4, where the other one, Rockford is another one, and Northern Illinois is the 4th one. So does that answer your question?
I just wanted to read more about it, and when I Googled it, this is what came up was the Pathway Project. So I just wanted to make sure I didn't start reading the 52-page document if it's not what you're talking about.
We actually got we have several materials from that visit. We can definitely provide them to you,
That would be great.
Yeah.
And then my only other question is, when we initially started talking about the pathways,
it seemed like there was more of a mention around internships. Is that still something that's on the table, or are we not necessarily going down that road?
Yeah, so internships is just one slice of a large pie of experiential learning opportunities that range from awareness. I think Dean mentioned kind of job shadowing. That's not awareness. That would be more in the awareness. The next tier. I can't remember the name of it. Yeah. It's a full range, and we don't believe every single student in the pathway is gonna have an internship or even wants an internship. What we want to make sure is that when a student says that is a viable option for them to actually apply those skills, we want to have that opportunity ready for them. And so that is the goal. I know internships got a lot of play last year, and they're great. I had several of them, but it's not a requirement. But it is an option that we want to provide students. Yeah.
Follow-ups from anyone?
I just want to thank Alex. He's not done working on Pathways by any means. He'll be, as he transitioned out of his lead role in Pathways, he'll be working very closely, of course, with the high schools on implementation as the head of our secondary schools. But I just want to thank him for his excellent work on this.
And
thank you,
Jen
Alex.
and Jen Wagner in absentia.
Yes, and Jen.
Thank you. All right. Second agenda item is middle school start times, and Karen is up.
Karen and Mike Barry Mike is going to join Karen. They've had 2 hours to sit and prepare for this presentation, so I'm feeling really good about it. Yeah. All right, I'm just going to pass it right over to them. Just thank you to Karen and Mike for taking the lead on trying to figure out what we can do here.
I'm beginning to get a little self-conscious. I really am.
We were so intrigued with Pathways that we forgot what we were going to say tonight. So hopefully it's all going to come back to us. So we joined you tonight just to give you an update for where we are with our middle school start times. As you know, the last couple of years there's been inquiry and interest into exploring the possibilities of later start times for our middle schoolers. Tonight, what we hope to receive from you is your reaction and direction to the ideas that we proposed to you tonight. So what we'd like to do is just give you a quick overview of what we know around our current status and service level around school start times for middle schoolers, and then go into our proposal for a proposed time and service level, which would actually increase around the service level, and then go into the cost and implementation along with our timeline for next steps. Okay, so currently, as you know, our middle schoolers start at 7:30, and research suggests that starting later would have a positive impact on our student behavior, readiness to learn, attendance, and sleep and health. Parents were surveyed last fall, and there was positive support for a later school start time, and it was positive, so that felt good, that we were in a good direction and we can continue the exploration. Under that exploration, what we did was we explored what our current service level was for our students at middle school, and so that you know that currently the way that students get to school is that we provide for transportation is on the Metro main line and Dodger routes. So, and students receive a bus pass if they reside more than 1.5 miles from school, and they also qualify for free and reduced lunch. Some statistics for you just to kind of get you grounded. One other thing that I want to point out to you is that our middle schoolers have the same transportation way to school as our high schoolers. Elementary currently, they do get the yellow bus, and anyone that resides 1.5 or in a hazardous area does receive a transportation service to school. So our current Safer Riders and Costs, we service 5,400 students in middle school. that attend, that enroll. Our enrollment is 5,400. About 42% of our students ride the Metro buses. And and our annual cost for our middle school for transportation is $1.2 million. And that includes our district-funded bus passes for middle school. We do have two services for two of our schools for yellow buses, and that is Spring Harbor and Cherokee. So our proposed start time through, I think for the board to remember, the last time we were here, we proposed 8:30 option. That was $2.1 million in addition to what we currently spend on transportation, and that was not. At that point, you wanted us to go back and see if we could find something that was less costly. So our proposal for this time is 9 o'clock, 9:15 start time with a 4:17 end time. And that would provide us an opportunity to have a triple route, which means the bus would have 3 stops at 3 different schools. So our 2 elementary schools and paired with the triple route, the triple stop would be with the middle school. And then that would be the same at the end of the school day. This proposed time, it makes the most efficient use of our Badger bus driver labor, the labor in the bus issue that was a constraint in our original plan. Not only the 9:15 to the 4:17 time, that's one part is the time, but then also when we explored a little bit more with our yellow buses, it is actually an upgrade in our current service level. And I wanted to let you know that because what we're proposing is that with the yellow bus route, we would have the same transportation service that our elementary students receive. So anyone that lives 1.5 or greater from school would have an opportunity to ride a yellow bus to school. So with the recommended of these 2 preliminary findings, the one at 9:15 start time and improved middle school bus service, we thought that what we need to do first before we move forward with that is to subject our families to another survey because of the 9:15 start time. We wanted to make sure we survey parents and staff before we move forward. If support is strong, we would begin a detailed implementation planning. So I'm going to let Mike talk about the cost, and he has some interesting facts on how it compares to other
Financial
districts.
facts, always very interesting. So I've been focusing mostly on the service level part of this issue, the middle school service level, in addition to the other points that Karen raised. And just our own sort of operational sense that if you're a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader, what the service level means to you is there is no yellow bus except for Cherokee and Spring Harbor. Essentially, you're riding Metro. And if you live within a mile and a half, you're on your own to ride Metro. If you live greater than a mile and a half, only if you meet income qualifications do you receive transportation assistance. To me, it just seems like kind of a substandard service level for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders to get to school. Just a perception, kind of a parent perception almost. So we wanted to test that, and that ran into this whole financial analysis where we're thinking about improving the service level at the same time we'd be changing the starting time back to 9:15. And we, as you know, we think this revised plan at $1.1 million was what we're recommending. What we wanted to look at was where are we in context in terms of the overall state averages on transportation. So these numbers were in the PowerPoint and didn't make it into the memo, and I wrote the memo, so my fault. But let me try these out on you. These are you can get these on DPI's website, 2014-15 statewide comparative data. Average Wisconsin school district spends $511 per pupil per year on transportation. $511. We spend $475. So, okay, that kind of confirms that we're a little bit below average, about 10%, and it suggests that maybe our service level is a little different. So just hold that thought. And the other was, well, if we did increase by 1.1 million with 27,500 students, we would end up right at the state average. Now, we didn't design it that way. It just seemed like a bit of serendipity, but I thought, okay, that makes sense. That, and it helped me sort of justify the financial argument around this service level question. I also think that it's always hard to sit in front of the board and say, oh, don't worry, we can afford that over the next 4 years. But I think if you can make the argument that we're currently below state average on transportation per pupil, it creates a little more incentive to get there, to make the effort to increase the service level. And then also, just earlier this year, we had a referendum to exceed revenue limits that was in part aimed at giving us the opportunity to make these kinds of changes as we see fit. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to agree with this one, but at least the opportunity is there. So that was the financial analysis on middle school service level. Happy to answer any questions, but I want to let Karen wrap up.
Yeah, so, well, we know what we need to do is to survey parents and staff around the 9 to 15 because it's a little bit different than the 8:30 time, but it's within 12% of the start times for middle schools across the nation. We would want to report back to the board to get direction from you in July, and if it is strong support from both parents and the board and staff, then we would go into planning in October. Do you have any questions?
I went last time. Last item, so I'm going to go first this time. First off, thank you for your work, and I think that, the survey is absolutely necessary. I mean, I'm a strong believer that we should be changing this, but if the will isn't there, and this is a different proposal than the initial survey was on, so I think that your timeline and plan is good in terms of that goes. I have one question, though, and this might be a Dylan question. It might be, wake up, Dylan. Legally, the state requires us to provide transportation for students. It's kind of a combination Dylan and Mike question. For students 2 miles away, not 1.5. 1.5 is district policy. Could we differentiate and do 2 miles transportation for middle school only? Or do we have to be consistent across? I mean, we're not consistent now that we provide different transportation for elementary and middle school.
I do have, because it is with this bus schedule, so a lot of this, and most within districts, when you are changing start times, it has to do with transportation and costs. So for us in Madison, if we remove Metro Dodger routes and change to 9:15, and we go to 2 miles and change in the 1.5, we're adding a barrier to a child that lives less than 2.0. So the child that lives 1.5 to 2 miles will not have access to transportation because the Dodger route would not be there for Metro.
No, I mean, I understand that, but I guess, and the related question is, are there significant cost differences is the other question, because it's not even worth thinking about if there's not significant cost differences.
We can certainly model it.
I think that's, if it takes us down to $700,000 instead of 1.2 million, then it might be worth considering. And it's legal.
I've got to look across grades because generally the standard is substantially equal. So even when we look then at private school transportation, which we also have obligations for, as we change our miles, that will also then impact private schools. So I have not seen within the statute any ability to have different mileage across grades. The city option doesn't speak about mileage, it speaks about the method of transportation, and it expressly does say you don't have to use that for all grades, you can use that for some grades. So generally it's substantially equal, which would be the same mileage kind of across your transportation option. So 1.5 for one, 1.5 for all. But I can look into that specific. The city option specifically says you don't need to do that K-12.
Right. I don't know who should go first, but I mean, if one works and and there's no real savings, then it doesn't matter. So you and Mike, if between the two of you, if both are possible, if we could get all that information, that'd be great. And Mike, we're spending, what, about $800,000 a year on private school transportation this year? Is that about right?
That number sounds right from last year. I don't know about
Yeah.
this year.
Just putting that in context also.
What did you say that was?
$800,000 a year on private school transportation.
800, yeah, that's what I wanted to know too.
Yeah, just putting a little
And do we
context
get
in
any-
this discussion.
Do we get any state funding for that? That's just out of our dime?
It's recorded as a part of our total transportation costs, and we receive transportation aid on our total transportation costs. So in a way, yes. Although frankly, state transportation aid
About-
is like 10 cents on the dollar.
It's like $270,000 this year,
Yeah.
280, something like
Yeah.
that.
It's not much.
It's like between $15 and $35 per pupil, depending on how far
Right.
they live. It comes out to, if we add these pupils, we'll get an extra $50,000. Is what it comes down to. If we
Right.
went with the full middle school yellow bus, we get $50,000 more from the state. Not much. Dean.
Yeah, I was just, if this is a good thing to do, why can't we just go all in and do it? Do Badger Bus and Metro need 4 years to figure out how to do this? You know what, I mean, I just don't see the if there's a benefit to it,
Right.
it should go across the board, and why have it 4 years before the last group gets the benefit? It doesn't, I don't know why we would, I know
Sure.
there's clear budget issues, but the only reason I see to do it is that Badger Bus and Metro need to have scale issues.
Yeah, let's take Badger Bus out of the equation. They said that they would need 2 years, maybe 3, but probably 2. That it would be hard for them to start this and do it all in 1 year. So they did not ask for 4 years. No, 4 years came from our budget concerns and looking at the 1 million, 1.1 million, and saying, all right, what can we phase in? Similar to the tech plan, maybe. It's a big lift, and we thought, okay, maybe $250,000 every year. You've seen the size of our priority actions, and wanted to make sure that while we attended to this, we didn't inadvertently, knock something else out of the priority actions plan. So that is open to discussion. Certainly, there's no magic about 4 years. 3 years would be $333,000 a year, and we just have to figure out, what our tolerance level is, and maybe the amount of enthusiasm from parents and staff will give you a sense of the urgency around it.
I guess one last question, Jay. In the research that we've seen, I didn't read it all. I just I've seen some of it, but how big a gap improvement strategy is this? Does anyone know? I mean, the benefits
I think
are there,
the medical
health-wise, all that, but-
community has really weighed in on the benefits. I mean, I said this, I think, at the last meeting, I think we would be putting ourselves in a difficult position if we were to prove that this somehow had some very direct impact on gap closing. I mean, I think attendance rates, the research shows attendance rates are better. I mean, students are there, more prepared to learn, but it always comes down to the
those
quality of
secondary
instruction at the end of the day. Yeah, so I think it really is about the research is there on the benefits of sleep for children. We don't need to redo that research. I think really it is about demand from parents. Is this something they want? And I think this new component about the level of service that we provide is compelling. It is for me. I know I've been in meetings with groups of parents. I remember my first meeting with the Latino Education Council almost 4 years ago now was almost completely dominated by concerns about middle schoolers on Metro buses and the desire for yellow buses. So I think there's something compelling about that argument, which is a little different than just the start time alone. So I think it's worth continuing to examine it. That would be my recommendation to the board. Like, let's just keep charging ahead, and if at some point it isn't compelling anymore, we call it quits. But I think we need to keep going.
James?
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time deciding from the data, and you guys give us a lot of data. Appreciate it. When you look across a lot of the indicators, I'm having a hard time deciding whether or not students, staff, parents want this. It's just not clear to me. For example, 81% of parents, 48% of staff, and 44% of students believe a later middle school end time would have a positive or neutral impact. I'm still not clear about the neutral piece. Is that 50% of them are neutral? So it would have been great if that was separated out, for example, positive or neutral, and it was combined. And so it's hard to, segregate out. And so when you look across, when I look across the data, it's just hard to decide, because one minute look like, one indicator looks like there's favor for this, and then you look at something else, one of the other indicators, and I don't have them all in front of me. It's just hard to determine. And then a lot of the surveys, the respondents are still majority white. So do we want a better distribution of respondents for this survey? And one of the things, too, that's always bothersome to me is that it's always difficult to separate out impacts. For example, what's the impact? We've had 4K now for, 6 years? So because we have a lot of initiatives in play at once, so what's the impact of 4K on student achievement? So, I mean, we don't seem to have a system where we could sit down and say, here we're doing 4K, we're doing these other host of initiatives, and we can talk about what's the impact of student achievement. So we really look at sort of a aggregate impact. And so, I just have a difficult time knowing where to move with this. The most important part for me is, do our parents really want this? And that's a question I'm still not able to answer based on the data. It seems to be, all over the place. There's a lot of indicators there, and I think it's good. But I'm having a hard time deciding, do we want it? What's the impact on achievement? I think the issue and the questions around what the benefits in terms of sleep benefits in medical community, I think those are things we're not debating. Those are things we accept, but the other aspects of it, I'm having a hard time deciding which way to move forward with it.
Do you want to kill it? And I'm not, right? And I'm not hearing that we want to kill it yet. Is that maybe not the nicest way to put it?
I think one of the things that I'm hearing is that that we are doing another survey if we don't kill it, and I don't think we're killing it.
We're not.
And I think that clarity, if we can phrase the questions and get the report with as much clarity as possible about the range and strength of people's feelings, and whatever efforts can be made to have a more representative sample would be much appreciated by all board members.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. We will have more information on this soon, but we've gotten some sense of the response rate for the most recent climate survey, and it's so much better. I mean, we put some very specific strategies into place. The results, I think you'll be very impressed, and I'm wondering what we can learn from what we did with the climate survey to apply it to
There's
this
a
one.
new survey tool. Even though our response rate was quite high
Was
for
high,
middle
yes.
school start time, it was.
Yes.
And also with student input and staff input, so there was a lot of time and energy into that. So we will continue to work with research and evaluation. We will also give you a draft of the questions if you want them, to look them over and give some feedback from the board before we do it. And then we'll get started at that.
I think Mary had
Yeah, I had a question.
question,
Oh,
comment.
I pack up while I.
Multitask.
No, and I was one who was not in favor of it. I'm certainly in favor of taking the next step. I definitely would like the data to inform that and not try to lead parents one way or another. I appreciate the point Dean brought up about the implementation. I would find it very hard if this is really popular with parents to do 4 years. It's one thing with technology, but this hits really close to home, at home. And I would suggest that we model it looking at, if we think 2 years is what the bus companies can accommodate, how that fits into our budget and priorities.
Okay, that's
Other
exciting.
Questions, comments? So survey next. All right, thank you again. I'll
you.
entertain a motion to adjourn. Advisory, second. Advisory vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you. We are adjourned.